A massive alien spacecraft hovers over Earth, and a bureaucrat named Prostetnik Vogon Jeltz announces through loudspeaker that the planet will be demolished in 2 minutes to make way for a hyperspace bypass. Arthur Dent, still in his bathrobe, watches his world literally explode while his friend Ford Prefect, who turns out to be an alien, pulls him into the cosmos at the last possible second. Douglas Adams spent over 20 years trying to adapt his own masterpiece for film. He wrote screenplay after screenplay, pitched to studio after studio, revised and compromised, and fought to preserve the absurdist philosophy that made Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy brilliant. Then, in 2001, he died suddenly of a heart attack at age 49, 3 years before filming began. He never saw his vision realized. The movie that finally emerged in 2005 had $50 million budget, major studio backing, beloved source material, and a cast that understood the assignment. It made $104 million worldwide. Technically profitable, but not the blockbuster Disney hoped for. Critics were split. Fans were disappointed. General audiences were confused. This is how Hollywood spent 2 decades and millions of dollars proving Douglas Adams was right about bureaucracy destroying everything, and why the moderate success hurt worse than outright failure would have. Douglas Adams started writing Hitchhiker's Guide screenplay drafts in the early 1980s.
Where did you get the idea for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Lying drunk in a field in Innsbruck.
That's the place.
It is.
Right after the BBC radio series became cultural phenomenon, every major studio passed. Too British, too weird, too uncommercial for American audiences. The humor was verbal and philosophical, not visual. The story meandered brilliantly without traditional structure. Hollywood executives couldn't figure out how to sell absurdist comedy about meaninglessness in an indifferent universe. To multiplex crowds, Adams kept revising for 20 years, adjusting for different directors, different studios, different decades of changing tastes. By the time Disney's Touchstone Pictures finally greenlit it in the early 2000s, riding the fantasy boom after Lord of the Rings, Adams had written countless drafts trying to preserve his vision while meeting studio demands for conventional narrative. Then he died, May 11th, 2001, heart attack at age 49. The screenplay was still unfinished. Cary Kirkpatrick was brought in to complete it, tasked with Americanizing the material. The tension between Adams' absurdist philosophy and Hollywood's need for hero's journey structure became unfixable without the author there to defend his choices. Kirkpatrick added romantic subplot between Arthur and Trillian that Adams never intended. The ending manufactured emotional closure that contradicted everything the book stood for. Garth Jennings, a music video director making his feature debut, understood Adams' visual style but couldn't preserve the verbal comedy. The animated guide entries, beautifully designed infographic sequences, became the film's best element. Pure Adams translated perfectly to screen. Stephen Fry's narration captured the book's sardonic tone flawlessly. But the rest struggled. The Vogon poetry torture scene worked perfectly. Bureaucratic cruelty as literal torture. Marvin the paranoid android looked wrong to fans expecting the book's description, but Alan Rickman's voice was perfect casting. The Heart of Gold's improbability drive created visual chaos that captured the concept. What got lost was the philosophy. Adams' humor came from cosmic indifference, from humans discovering they're irrelevant in a universe that doesn't care. Hollywood needed Arthur to be a hero who mattered, who could save something, who could get the girl. The compromise satisfied nobody. Martin Freeman as Arthur Dent was the one casting decision everyone agreed on. Freeman's bewildered Englishman persona, perfected years later as Bilbo Baggins and John Watson, fit Arthur perfectly. His performance captured the essence of a man whose biggest problem was saving his house from demolition, only to watch his entire planet explode 5 minutes later. Freeman sold the existential crisis with perfect deadpan timing. Mos Def as Ford Prefect divided fans immediately. Race-blind casting was progressive. but Ford's supposed to be alien pretending to be British. Def's American accent undermined that completely. He brought manic energy that worked in isolation, but clashed with the material's dry British humor. The performance was good. It just felt wrong for the character Zooey Deschanel's Trillian became the manic pixie dream girl nobody asked for.
Come on.
You idiot! You signed the order to destroy Earth.
In the books, Trillian was astrophysicist who'd already moved on from Arthur before Earth's destruction. The film turned her into quirky love interest whose main purpose was giving Arthur emotional stakes. Deschanel was charming, but trapped in a role that betrayed the source material. Sam Rockwell understood the assignment completely. His Zaphod Beeblebrox, the two-headed, three-armed ex-president of the galaxy, played the absurdity at full volume. Rockwell made Zaphod a narcissistic idiot who stumbled into heroism by accident, exactly as Adams intended. The practical two-head effect looked ridiculous, but Rockwell's manic performance made you stop caring about technical limitations. Alan Rickman, voicing Marvin the paranoid android, was inspired casting Rickman's deadpan delivery of, "I've been waiting for you for 1.7 million years," captured the robot's depression perfectly. Bill Nighy's brief appearance as Slartibartfast, the planet designer, was criminally underused, one of many supporting performances buried under pacing problems. The Arthur-Trillian romance killed what little momentum existed. Their chemistry felt forced because the relationship was forced, invented to give the film emotional center that Adams deliberately avoided. When Arthur declares his feelings during the film's climax, it's Hollywood sentiment grafted onto material about cosmic meaninglessness. Filming began in April 2004 at Elstree Studios outside London, the same facility where Star Wars was born. Garth Jennings insisted on practical effects wherever possible. The Vogons were actors in elaborate suits rather than CGI creations, requiring hours of makeup application daily. The puppeteering and animatronics gave them physical presence that digital aliens couldn't match. The Heart of Gold spaceship interior was built as massive practical set, its white curved surfaces and retro-futuristic design reflecting 1970s optimism about space travel. Production designer Joel Collins created worlds that felt tactile and real, despite the absurdist premise, grounding visual madness in physical reality. Sam Rockwell's second head for Zaphod went through multiple iterations. Early versions were fully animatronic, but they looked creepy rather than funny. The final version, a smaller head on a mechanical arm, was Rockwell's compromise between book accuracy and practical filmmaking. He performed most scenes with the prosthetic attached, genuinely dealing with the awkward weight and movement limitations. The Magrathea Planet Factory sequences required combination of practical miniatures and early CGI. The floating platforms where Slartibartfast shows Arthur custom-built planets were physical sets enhanced digitally, creating seamless blend that holds up better than pure CGI would have. Budget constraints forced creative solutions. The Planet Factory's grand scale was suggested through forced perspective and matte paintings rather than expensive digital construction. The Vogon homeworld's bureaucratic nightmare aesthetic came from repurposed industrial locations rather than built sets. Martin Freeman spent weeks filming in just bathrobe and pajamas, actually uncomfortable in the cold British studio, which accidentally made Arthur's bewilderment more authentic. Sometimes physical discomfort creates better performances than comfort ever could. Why it disappointed. April 29th, 2005. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy opened to $21 million domestic. Respectable, but not spectacular. Final worldwide gross reached $104 million against $50 million budget Disney had wanted blockbuster franchise launching multiple sequels. Instead, they got modest success that barely justified its existence. Roger Ebert gave it 2.5 stars, calling it inspired but uneven, as if the filmmakers wanted to cram every weird idea from Adams into the runtime without considering if they worked cinematically. Rotten Tomatoes settled at 60%, the dreaded mixed reviews that meant nobody loved it enough to defend it passionately. Fans felt betrayed by changes from source material, particularly the romantic subplot and manufactured happy ending. General audiences were confused by the British humor, the absurdist philosophy, the narrative that wandered without clear direction. The film fell into the worst possible space. Too weird for mainstream success, too compromised for cult appreciation. Hitchhiker's Guide works through ideas and verbal humor, not plot or visual spectacle. Adams' brilliance was philosophical observation disguised as science fiction. The books meander delightfully because the journey matters more than destination films, demand narrative momentum, heroes' journeys, emotional payoffs. Studio notes push the screenplay toward conventional structure. Arthur needed to be reluctant hero rather than cosmic accident victim. The romance manufactured stakes in story about universe's indifference to human concerns. The ending provided closure when Adams' entire point was that closure is illusion we create to feel better about chaos. Douglas Adams' absence meant nobody could defend these choices when studio executives demanded changes. Kirkpatrick and Jennings did their best, but without Adams there to argue for preserving the material's essence, every compromise pushed further from what made Hitchhikers special. DVD sales were decent, but not franchise launching. No sequel was greenlit despite the film technically making profit. Disney lost faith in the property. The disappointment of being merely okay when it should have been extraordinary haunted everyone involved. The tragedy wasn't that it failed, it's that it succeeded just enough to exist, but not enough to matter. Legacy and modern context. The animated guide entries became the film's most influential element, pioneering the infographic-style visual philosophy that now dominates YouTube explainer videos and educational content. Those sequences, beautifully designed animations illustrating guide definitions with Stephen Fry's narration, proved Adams' ideas translated perfectly to visual medium when handled correctly. Martin Freeman's performance launched his status as geek culture icon. Playing Arthur Dent directly led to casting as Bilbo Baggins in the Hobbit trilogy. Freeman became go-to actor for bewildered everyman thrust into fantastic circumstances, a career trajectory that started with bathrobe-clad confusion, watching Earth explode. Sam Rockwell's Zaphod influenced how actors approach comic absurdist performances. The willingness to play ridiculous character with complete commitment without winking at audience became template for Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy and other films balancing humor with sincerity. The film reignited conversations about unadaptable source material. Some books resist translation to different medium, regardless of budget or talent. Terry Pratchett's Discworld novels remain largely unfilmed for similar reasons. The humor is too specifically literary, too dependent on narrative voice and philosophical observation. Modern streaming era might have served Hitchhikers better. A limited series could meander through Adams' universe without rushing toward climax. The Good Place proved audiences would embrace existential philosophy disguised as comedy. Rick and Morty owes massive debt to Adams' approach to meaninglessness and absurdity. The cult following that emerged appreciates what worked while mourning what didn't. Annual Towel Day celebrations on May 25th keep Adams' legacy alive, honoring his philosophy that anyone traveling through space should always know where their towel is. But the film's okayness remains its curse, remembered as missed opportunity rather than outright disaster. Sometimes failing spectacularly is better than succeeding modestly, because at least spectacular failure generates passionate response.